Hello, this is a video here titled "Will Elijah come back before the tribulation period?" Question mark. Uh, channel Todd Hampson, YouTube channel Todd Hampson, and he is trying to give an answer to this question. Let's first watch the video, and I will give a commentary on this because I think he's mistaken in his explanation. Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving week, everybody. I hope everyone is either traveling or staying at home, but having some family over and just really being thankful for the things that you have and kind of focusing on that. Wanted to make sure I still recorded a video this week that you could kind of dig into in terms of prophecy. And this week I'm pulling it from a question that I was asked. And I get this question from time to time. And it's basically, is Elijah going to come before the rapture or before the return of Christ? And kind of a little bit of confusion about that. But that's the basic question: is Elijah supposed to come before Jesus comes? And where they get that from is, if you remember in Matthew 17 with the Mount of Transfiguration, after they wrapped everything up and they saw Moses and Elijah and Jesus in their glorified form, they're coming down, and it says, as they're coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. The disciples asked him, and this is where the question kind of comes from. The disciples asked him, why then do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him everything that they wished. So the teachers of the law had this common saying that Elijah must come before the Messiah came. And Jesus' point there is, and there's another place where he says, John the Baptist came in the spirit and the manner of Elijah, but it wasn't actually Elijah. And in that verse I just referenced, he affirms that, to be sure, Elijah still will come before that great day. So it begs the question, where does that come from? Is there a prophecy in the Old Testament? And the answer is yes. In Malachi 4, if you read all of chapter 4, but it talks about basically a time of tribulation on the world, a time of God's judgment, which is known as the day of the Lord. And this is all through the Old Testament, and the New Testament talks about it as well. But in that passage, in verse 5, Malachi says, see, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord. He will turn the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents. So the question is, when does this happen? The time clue we're given here is that it's before the day of the Lord, before the tribulation period, which starts with the confirming of a covenant based on Daniel 9:27, or if you look in Revelation chapter 6, when Jesus starts opening the seals, that's the beginning of the tribulation. So this prophecy says that Elijah would come before the day of the Lord. So Jesus says that was partly fulfilled in John. John came in the spirit of Elijah, but he says, but still there's coming a time before the day of the Lord that Elijah himself will come. Now, the question is, when is that going to happen? Is that going to happen before the rapture, after the rapture? I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. I believe it's going to happen after the rapture, but before the beginning of the Daniel 70th week, the 7-year tribulation period. A lot of people don't realize, they think the rapture is what starts the tribulation period, but it's not. There's actually a gap period between the rapture and the actual official beginning of the day of the Lord. So there's a gap there. We don't know how long that is. Could be days, weeks, months. Excuse me. I tend to think it's going to be a pretty short amount of time, but I believe Elijah shows up on the scene. As a matter of fact, we read a little bit about that. I believe in, excuse me, I'm kind of fighting through a cold. When we get to Revelation 11, we discover these two witnesses. And it doesn't say who they are, but they perform the same signs that Moses and Elijah performed. Moses and Elijah showed up on the Mount of Transfiguration, so there's a tie-in there. So we don't know for sure who they are, but it seems logical to me that it's Moses and Elijah representing the law and the prophets If you've studied this before, the tribulation period, God's focus is now off the church and he shifts it back to Israel. So he has these two Jewish witnesses prophesying in Jerusalem. And I believe out of their ministry will come the 144,000 Jewish witnesses who are called the first fruits of those saved in the tribulation period. First fruits of all the Jews that will be saved by the end of the tribulation period, as it says in Romans 11:25, that one day all Israel will be saved. But there's a process here. So I believe the two witnesses show up on the scene sometime probably right after the rapture and the chaos and the aftermath of the rapture. They're in Jerusalem. They're prophesying. That's a whole nother topic about what happens to them at the midpoint and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just talking about who they are. But for sure, one of them is Elijah. There's debate on who that second person is. I believe there's evidence that it will probably be Moses. It makes the most sense to me. And some people argue, well, Moses, he died, but he wasn't caught up. Like Elijah was caught up, he was raptured. Enoch was also caught up and raptured, so Enoch's another candidate. They're like, those guys have never died, so they show back up on the scene. But there's something really mysterious about the body of Moses. If you read Jude, there's Satan and Michael fought over the body of Moses. So there's something special there. There's something going on, probably some mystery we won't understand until we see it in hindsight. But God leaves that kind of hanging out there. So I'm not dogmatic about that, but I think it is probably Moses that's with Elijah there. So I believe he does show up on the scene just as prophesied, and it fits perfectly. That's the thing. When you synthesize scripture, it all joins together like a puzzle, paints the same picture, and kind of gives us clarity and confirmation that we're on the right track. And as always, we should be willing to shift gears or look at a different position if there's evidence in scripture that points a different direction. We let scripture be our guide, not our preconceived notion of what's going on. But all that to say, yes, Elijah will show up on the scene before the tribulation period, but I believe that will take place after the rapture. Now it could possibly happen before, maybe just before the rapture, but the rapture is an imminent event. It's a signless event that could happen at any time. So to me, it makes most sense that Elijah and Moses would show up on the scene right after the rapture, maybe right before or around the time of the confirming of that covenant that starts the day of the Lord. So again, looking at the prophets of the Old Testament, looking at synthesizing it with Revelation and the words of Jesus, it all links up. It all makes sense. It's an exciting thing to study. It drives you deeper into scripture. And of course, the most important thing is that we point people to Christ through the amazing proofs of Bible prophecy. Fulfilled prophecy is a great apologetic that the Bible can be trusted, and that God says what he means and means what he says, and he's a promise keeper. And it's also a great proof for the hermeneutic or the Bible study method that says we can trust that what God said is going to happen in the future will also come to pass, just like all fulfilled prophecy did. So lots there to chew on. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and have a fantastic Thanksgiving. And I'll catch up with you next week, Lord willing. Take care.
Okay, he is explaining that after come down from the Mount of Transfiguration, uh, uh, disciples ask him that people saying for them that before the Messiah, Elijah should come, and where they looking for Elijah, where is Elijah? And Jesus replying that he already came. Elijah had come, but they didn't recognize him. And after he said that they understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. So Jesus here clearly said that Elijah already came. So this means that this answer already shows that Jesus is the Messiah, because it means that Elijah came. It means that the Messiah already after Elijah coming Messiah. This means that it shows that the Messiah already came. What the Todd Hampson doing next is saying that in some other place in the Bible, Jesus said that Elijah came in like John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah, but he is not Elijah himself, not Elijah. No, it's not the coming of Elijah. He is right here. He is contradicting himself because first, uh, Jesus said Elijah already came, and the disciples understood that he talked about John the Baptist. It's clear that John the Baptist is the second coming of Elijah here, but he is trying to kind of uh, move away from this and say that uh, he, the John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah, but he's not Elijah. He's kind of making a sleight of hand in here. And also, what's mean if he say like this? It means that Jesus, the coming of Jesus is not that the expected day that Jews waited for that day. It's not that Jesus came that day. It's some other day in the future when Jesus will come back a second time. So he again is leading into this leading the his audience in a wrong way, because there is a place in the Bible I will read. In the I think in Matthew. Where is that? In Matthew chapter 11 verse 13 is saying, "For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John," means John the Baptist. So the Old Testament doesn't prophesy about second coming of Jesus, because there wasn't any expectation for the second coming of Jesus in the Old Testament. The Old I'm sorry. The Old Testament is testifying about the only one Messiah that need to come. The the second coming of Elijah, of Messiah, it it was it is a different thing. It's not that what prophesying the Old Testament, but he is saying like Old Testament is prophesying that Elijah didn't come before Jesus. Elijah will come sometimes in the future, when before the second coming of Jesus, or before the tribulation day. Tribulation day. That his mistake in here, I think he doesn't know that he making mistake, but his mistake in here is that tribulation day is the time of the Messiah, the time of Jesus. That is the day of the tribulation. That is the day that everybody waited for. They didn't wait for somewhere another day after that, the second coming of the Messiah. So that is what he's doing here. And what I want to explain more here also, in this sense, they try to justify this kind of reasoning that he's making here is kind of justifying the kind of that God already predestined that Jesus will die on a cross. God predestined that there will be a second coming, and God predestined that Elijah will come before the tribulation then that will happen, before the second coming of Jesus. That is not such. Ask any Jew. No any Jew thinks like this. They just waiting one Messiah, and they're waiting for Elijah to come before the Messiah. And they're still waiting for Elijah to come. That's why they didn't believe in Jesus, that Jesus is the Messiah, because they looking for Elijah. They still looking for Elijah until now, in the present day. So that's the misunderstanding in this video. And one thing I want to explain more is that this second coming of Elijah is John the Baptist. Is means when the prophet Malachi is saying, "I will send you the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction." In the Malachi chapter 5, verse 5 and 6. So here Malachi is saying that I will send Elijah. Elijah lived 850 years before Jesus, and Elijah go to the heaven in a chariot, and they people saw him going in heaven like that, and in a sense they're expecting him to come from heaven in the same way. However, the expectation is incorrect, because Jesus is saying that John the Baptist is Elijah. So the second coming of Elijah is not Elijah himself, is another person who is John the Baptist, who was born on earth. He didn't come from in a chariot from the sky. So this is this is logical. When you see Jesus saying that John is Elijah, he doesn't. He is following all the expectation of the Jews, and not about some kind of second coming of that I am Messiah. Jesus didn't reason like this. I am Messiah, and I will come again somewhere in the future, and that time the Elijah will come. But now, in this time, while I am alive, while I'm here on earth, John the Baptist is in the spirit of Elijah, doing Elijah's job, kind of like symbolically, not real. No, it's nothing like that. John the Baptist is the second coming of Elijah. Different person, not coming from the sky, is born on the earth as a child. So according to this logic, also we can conclude that second coming of Jesus will happen in the same way. It will not come from heaven. Jesus will not come from heaven the way people expecting Elijah to come from heaven. It will be somebody else will be born, and that person will be second coming of Jesus in the future. That's how Jesus will come back. It will not be Jesus. It will be a different person with the mission of Jesus. Like John the Baptist is a different person than Elijah, but he has the same mission as Elijah. So that's the whole point about the analogy of Elijah and John the Baptist is we can see this analogy and can conclude that based on this analogy, Jesus also, second coming of Christ, will be also a different person in the future, and will come not from the sky, but will be born. So that's what I wanted to say from this video. And let's. Here I want to read a little bit from the Divine Principle. There is in the first part of Divine Principles, there is a chapter called the Messiah, His coming, and and the purpose of His second coming. So the second coming here, the section is called the second coming of Elijah and John the Baptist, and let's read this section. The prophet Malachi foretold that Elijah would come again, and this is the quote from the Bible, Malachi 4, verse 5. Behold, I will send you Elijah, the prophet, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. End quote. So, Jesus testified that the prophesied coming of Elijah was realized in none other than John the Baptist. I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not know him, but did to him whatever they pleased. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. Matthew chapter 17, verses 12 to 13. Nevertheless, John the Baptist didn't recognize himself to be the second coming of Elijah. John chapter 1, verse 21. And neither did the Jewish people. John's ignorance reinforced his doubts about Jesus. Matthew chapter 11, verse 3. Since many Jewish people esteemed John the Baptist, they respected John's point of view. This exacerbated their disbelief in Jesus. John's ignorance was a major factor in compelling Jesus to go the way of the cross. So next section is section 2:1, the Jewish belief in the return of Elijah. During the period of the United Kingdom, God's ideal for his holy temple was thwarted by Satan through the transgressions of King Solomon. And parallels. Chapter 3, we can read about that. To restore the temple and pave the way for the advent of the Messiah, who is the incarnation of the temple, God sent 4 major and 12 minor prophets to Israel and worked through them to purify Israel of all satanic influences. Beside this, God sent the prophet Elijah to confront the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. He defeated them with the power of God and cast down their altars to Baal. However, Elijah ascended to heaven in a whirlwind and a fiery chariot. In the 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 11. Before he could complete his divine mission, Satan's power revived and continued to plague God's providence. The way of the Messiah could not be made straight until Satan's influence was removed. Hence, before Jesus could realize the ideal of the incarnate temple, another prophet should inherit and complete Elijah's unfinished mission of breaking people's ties with Satan. Due to this providential necessity, the prophet Malachi foretold that Elijah would come again. Malachi chapter 4, verse 5. The Jewish people who believed in the prophecies of Scripture fervently hoped for the advent of the Messiah. Yet we should know that they longed just as eagerly for the return of Elijah. This was because God had clearly promised through the prophet Malachi that he would send the prophet Elijah prior to the advent of the Messiah to prepare the way of the Lord. Elijah had ascended to heaven about 850 years before the birth of Jesus. Since then, he has abided in the spirit world. We are familiar with the story of the transfiguration, when Elijah and Moses spiritually appeared before the disciples of Jesus. Luke chapter 9, verses 28 to 36. Many Jews believed that when Elijah came again, he would descend from heaven in the same manner as he had ascended to heaven. Just as there are Christians today who are resolutely looking to the sky with the expectation that Jesus will come in the clouds, Jews of Jesus' day were looking up to the sky, anxiously awaiting the coming of Elijah. Nevertheless, before any news was heard about Elijah having come again to fulfill Malachi's prophecy, Jesus suddenly appeared and claimed to be the Messiah. It is no wonder that Jesus' appearance and proclamation stirred up all of Jerusalem in great confusion. Wherever Jesus' disciples went, they were bombarded with the question about Elijah, who was supposed to come first. Lacking an adequate answer themselves, the disciples turned to Jesus, asking, "Then why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come?" Matthew chapter 17, verse 10. Jesus replied that John the Baptist was the very Elijah whom the people were awaiting. Matthew chapter 17, verses 12 to 13. Since the disciples already believed that Jesus was the Messiah, they willingly accepted his testimony that John the Baptist was Elijah. Yet, how could others who did not know Jesus accept this controversial claim? Jesus himself expected that they would not readily believe it, and hence he said, "If you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who is to come." Matthew chapter 11, verse 13. What made it even more difficult for the Jewish people to believe in Jesus' proclamation was the earlier denial by John the Baptist. John had insisted he was not Elijah, and they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." John chapter 1, verse 21. So I will stop here. I hope you can read the divine principle more because it's very important to understand more what's happened after this in Jesus' mission. So the what his name? Todd Hampton is explaining things, but is not correct, because even if you look logically, the Bible cannot say that doesn't say that the prophecies in the Old Testament, they are not referred to the second coming of Jesus. Also, the tribulation time that will happen sometimes in the future. The prophecies in the Old Testament are for the before Jesus, before John. All the prophecies are happening is for John prophets. So that's why the second coming of Jesus there was not expected in Jews. Jewish people never expected the Messiah and the second coming of Messiah. There is no such thing in the Jewish mind. But however, that's why we need to follow the correct understanding of Scripture. Thank you. I hope I helped somebody to understand this kind of things, these verses in the Bible, and answer to this question.